Last month, my son asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. We were driving home after a family gathering. My phone rang for the third time in 20 minutes. An uncle needed advice about a land issue. A cousin wanted help paying a school fee balance. Earlier that day, I had spent almost an hour helping settle an argument between two relatives. My son watched me end another call and shook his head. "Dad, why do you always answer when family calls?" I laughed. At first, I was going to give him a simple answer. Then I thought about my father, and suddenly I was back in the year he died. My name is Michael. I was 28 years old when my father died. My younger sister Grace was still in university. My younger brother Daniel had just completed his NICE. My mother Helen had never managed the family's finances alone. And my father, Raymond, had spent more than 30 years quietly carrying responsibilities nobody knew existed. We only discovered that after he was gone. Growing up, my father seemed ordinary. Not because he was insignificant, because he was dependable, the kind of man who never created drama, never demanded praise, never reminded people of his sacrifices. He left for work every morning, returned every evening, paid bills, solved problems, handled responsibilities, the sort of father many families have and rarely stop to appreciate. Life around him worked so smoothly that we assumed it worked that way naturally. That was our first mistake. The second was believing stability requires no effort. The day he died began like every other day. He ate breakfast, spoke briefly with my mother, picked up his car keys and left for work. By evening he was dead, a heart attack. Sudden, unexpected, one phone call, one drive to the hospital, one conversation with the doctor, and everything changed. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Relatives filled the house. Plastic chairs covered the compound. People prayed, people cried. Food arrived from neighbors. Stories about my father flowed endlessly. Everyone talked about what we had lost. A husband, a father, a provider, a good man. Nobody talked about what was coming next, because none of us knew. After the funeral, life slowly began moving again. That was when the real loss revealed itself. The first problem appeared when my mother tried to access certain bank accounts. What should have been simple became complicated. Documents were missing, procedures took time, requirements kept changing. Meanwhile, bills continued arriving. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in my mother's eyes. Not because there was no money, because the person who understood everything was gone. One afternoon, she sat at the dining table, surrounded by papers, bank forms, insurance documents, receipts, property files. I walked in expecting to find her working. Instead, she was staring into space. The papers lay untouched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked at me. "Your father made this look easy." That was all she said, but her voice cracked, and suddenly she began crying, not the loud grief people displayed during the funeral. This was different. This was exhaustion, overwhelm, fear, the realization that she had inherited an entire world she didn't know how to manage. I sat beside her without speaking, because for the first time, I understood something I had never understood while my father was alive. Grief is not always missing someone. Sometimes grief is inheriting everything they used to carry. That realization stayed with me. Then more discoveries followed. Growing up, I believed our extended family was unusually close. After my father's death, old conflicts started resurfacing. Arguments appeared. Misunderstandings multiplied. Relatives stopped speaking to one another. Property disagreements emerged. Sides were chosen. Relationships fractured. At first, I couldn't understand why then. One uncle said something during an argument. If Raymond were here, this wouldn't be happening. The room became quiet because everyone knew he was right. My father had been the person making phone calls nobody wanted to make, visiting relatives nobody wanted to visit, resolving conflicts nobody wanted to resolve. He had spent years quietly maintaining relationships we simply never noticed because he never advertised it. Then there was Daniel, my younger brother. For years, he and my father argued constantly about career choices, about responsibility, about the future. Sometimes their disagreements lasted days. One evening, months after the funeral, I found Daniel sitting alone outside. He was holding an old photograph. I sat beside him. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said something. I thought there would be more time. I knew exactly what he meant. More time to apologize. More time to understand. More time to appreciate. More time to become friends instead of opponents. But death had ended that possibility, and no amount of regret could reopen the door. Watching Daniel struggle taught me a painful lesson. The people we argue with today sometimes become the people we miss most tomorrow. But perhaps the greatest revelation came from stories. Stories I had never heard. Stories strangers began telling after my father's death. An elderly neighbor visited one afternoon. He told us my father had quietly helped pay for medication during a difficult period. A distant relative revealed that my father had contributed to school fees for years. Another family friend shared how my father had once covered emergency hospital expenses without telling anyone. Again and again, people arrived carrying stories. Each one revealed a version of my father I barely knew. And each one left me feeling proud and ashamed, because strangers sometimes understood his generosity better than his own children did. For nearly 2 years, our family struggled to adjust. My mother slowly learned the responsibilities my father once handled. Grace graduated from university. Daniel found stable work. Life began finding a new rhythm, not the old rhythm, a new one. Then one evening we sat together sharing memories. We laughed about old stories, talked about childhood, remembered family trips, remembered his terrible jokes, remembered the habits that used to annoy us and now made us smile. Eventually, the conversation turned quiet. My mother looked around the room. Then she said something none of us have ever forgotten. The most important thing your father gave this family wasn't money. Nobody spoke. It wasn't the house either. Still nobody spoke. It was stability. The room fell silent because suddenly everything made sense. Stability, the ability to sleep peacefully because someone is paying attention. The confidence that problems will be handled. The comfort of knowing somebody reliable stands between your family and chaos. That was what my father had built. Not just income, not just possessions, stability. And when he died, we discovered how valuable that truly was. Today, more than 10 years later, I understand him far better than I did when he was alive. I think about him whenever a bill gets paid, whenever a family disagreement gets resolved, whenever somebody quietly sacrifices for others without seeking recognition. Because the older I get, the more I realize something important. The strongest people in many families are often invisible, not because they do little, because they do so much that everyone mistakes their efforts for normal life. My father was one of those people, and his death taught us a lesson we should have learned while he was alive. Sometimes a person's value is not measured by what they own, not by what they earn, not by their job title, not by their achievements. Sometimes their value is measured by how many things stop working when they are gone. We thought we had lost a father, and we had, but we also lost a mediator, a problem solver, a protector, a planner, a peacemaker, a source of stability, a man carrying burdens nobody else could see. And by the time we finally understood the weight he had been carrying, there was nobody left to thank. The traffic lights ahead of us turned green. My son's question brought me back to the present. Dad? I glanced at him and smiled. Because somebody has to answer. He looked confused. So I continued. Families stay together because somebody keeps showing up. Somebody makes the calls. Somebody solves the problems. Somebody carries things other people don't even notice. I paused, thinking about my father. The hard part is that people usually don't understand how much you're carrying until the day you stop carrying it. My son stared out the window for a moment, then he nodded quietly. And as I drove home, I realized that was the final gift my father left behind. Not money, not property, not even security perspective. The understanding that love is often invisible, that responsibility rarely receives applause, and that some of the most important people in our lives are the ones working so quietly that we mistake their sacrifices for ordinary life. My father spent decades holding our world together. We only saw the weight after he was gone, and that is what we lost after Dad died.